All right, guys, welcome back. um, so we ended talking about the amendment process and kind of the three branches and what we'll talk about moving forward. So now let's shift a little bit and let's talk about the preamble of the Constitution. So the preamble of the Constitution is significant because it lists the purposes of the American government, right? It's basically just an opening paragraph, right? It's your intro to the Constitution. It tells you what it's going to do, what its goals are, what its objectives are. Kind of lays out the broad overview for the rest of what's going to come in the Constitution, which we'll talk about through the rest of this screencast. All right, so there are 6 significant things that the Constitution wants to accomplish. All right, so it starts, we the people of the United States. Again, popular sovereignty. It's stating that the people are the ultimate source of power. And then what do the people want to accomplish? In order to, and then these are the 6 things we want to do. One is form a more perfect union. So that makes sense if you think about linking that back to the Articles of Confederation, where we had a very imperfect union, right? We had a union that was fraught with conflict between state to state, right? We didn't have a cohesive economy or kind of tranquil or productive relationships between the states, which kind of undermined the collective economy as a whole. So we need to shore up our more perfect union. And when we look at federalism coming up in chapter 4, we're going to talk about how we ensure that all of the states kind of get along, mainly full faith and credit and stuff like that. The second is to establish justice, right? And so establishing justice, we talked a lot about this in the last Federalist Paper 51 that you guys read. And we're going to talk about, all right, how do we punish those who need to get punished, leave those alone who didn't do anything wrong, and have people feel like they receive some sort of retribution if something wrong was done against them. Mainly think of that as like setting up and establishing a court system. Remember, again, under the Articles of Confederation, they didn't really have a court system. So that was a big step moving towards the Constitution. The third goal of the Constitution is to ensure domestic tranquility. So how can we provide for a peaceful relationship between citizens and between state governments and between with all of the diversity that exists within our country, even during those times. So stuff like religious freedom, freedom of speech, all add to kind of maybe some volatility, but how can we manage that volatility and make relationships more tranquil? They also provide for the common defense. So if you remember, weakness of the Articles of Confederation, no national military, no higher authority. So we need to have a system where we can collectively defend ourselves as a country. Really, this is a big one where they set up the division of power of military force, but gave the national government an actual military. The 5th goal would be promote the general welfare. So this is kind of a big one because it's really broad, right? So what's general welfare? It's kind of like saying that our Constitution's ultimate goal is to make things better for everyone. So this is kind of what provides access to build stuff like the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, stuff that's not explicitly in the Constitution, but that helps the public by and large. And then the last goal is to secure the blessings of liberty, so to protect freedom and choice and opportunity to ourselves and our posterity. What that means is we want it to be achieved now during the time that everyone lives in, and put structures in place that ensure that liberty will continue to be available to all who come after us. So then the last part just says, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States. So pretty much just talking about like, hey, these are our general goals. We believe the Constitution is the best way to achieve these goals. And then they lay out specific structures moving forward in order to help achieve those goals. So these are significant. Essay question on your final is going to ask you to identify one of these, provide segments of the Constitution that explains how they attempt to do this, and then give current day examples or pieces of legislation that help achieve these goals. So, that's a depth of knowledge level 3 type question, where it's asking you to analyze and then structure a formulated response. Okay, so that is the goal of the preamble of the Constitution. All right, so next part. How do we organize this Constitution? What is the architecture of the U.S. Constitution? Like, hey, I need to find something. Where would I go to get access to that? Well, Article 1 is all about the legislative branch. If it's anything about making laws, or if it's anything about our representatives, it's found in Article 1. Article 2 is the executive branch. If it has anything to do with the presidency, that's where you can find it. Article 3 is the judicial branch. So anything about the Supreme Court or the structure of our court systems. Article 4 is the states. So Article 4 is all about the relationships between states and the relationships between the national government and the states. Okay, so what do we guarantee each state to have? Like, for example, we guarantee each state has a representative form of government. So they're going to have elected officials, and they're going to have a division of branches. And then Article 5 is the amendment process. So basically, we just went over Article 5 in the last screencast, how amendments are both proposed and approved. And then we have Article 6, which is the supremacy of the Constitution and federal law. Article 6 is significant because it basically says if there's ever any conflict between laws that states make or laws that the national governments make, the national government, their laws are held at a higher level. So take, for example, legalization of marijuana in Colorado. Federal law says marijuana is an illegal substance. Colorado state law says it is not illegal. It's a legal substance. If the federal, if like the FTA or the FBI or some national body would go into Colorado, they could shut people down for selling, producing, and distributing or smoking marijuana. Now, they haven't done that yet, mostly because the federal government's saying they have enough on their plate not to worry about it. But they could, and that could change if President Trump wants to change. But Obama has, during his 8 years, or at least last 4 when marijuana was legal, chose not to do that. Article 7 is the ratification process. So how are we going to approve the Constitution? We went over that when we talked about the Constitutional Convention and the ratification of the Constitution. It's kind of outdated now. The Constitution was ratified a long time ago. And then the last section is the amendments. There's 27 of them. We'll talk more about that when we get to the last part. So you are going to have to remember these in order. A good way to remember these is to kind of take the first letter of each one and create a sentence. So legislative, executive, judicial, states, amendment, supremacy, and ratification. All right. The way I structure this, the way that helps me is looking at this in this form. Right. So here's the sentence I come up with. Let's eat jelly sandwiches and some raisins. Okay, so if you can remember that, you can remember the process of each article in the Constitution in order: legislative, executive, judicial, states, amendment, supremacy, and ratification. Okay, so that's the last screencast for today. Be sure that you complete your A More Perfect Union reflection, which is on Blackboard. It's directly under Article 2, 3, or Chapter 2, 3, and 4 section. And be sure and turn that in using Safe Assign so that I can make sure you're not plagiarizing. Have Have a good day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.